Hey everyone, welcome to this urgent video where we break down the current geopolitical tensions. Today, we're focusing on urgent, the United States under pressure, Russia enters via the SEA, Venezuela changes the game. We'll explore how Russia's naval presence at sea is putting the US in a tough spot, and how Venezuela is shifting the balance. Based on historical and recent facts, we're reformulating everything for a fresh analysis. Subscribe so you don't miss the hidden side of international news. What you're about to learn could completely change your view of the dynamics in our Western Hemisphere. Forget the oversimplified stories from mainstream news channels. The reality is far more nuanced and often hidden. Right now, Russian military vessels are sailing the seas near Venezuela, and this is no casual visit. It's a show of force that's challenging over a century of American dominance in Latin America. The most ironic part? Washington bears a large share of responsibility for this escalation. My name is your name or handle, and I'm going to reveal facts that American elites would rather keep quiet. Major media outlets are downplaying these elements, but they explain why Moscow is positioning its fleet just a stone's throw from the United States, and how this logically stems from decades of flawed U.S. foreign policies. We're witnessing a major turning point, comparable to the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, where the Monroe Doctrine, that cornerstone declaring Latin America as an exclusive U.S. sphere of influence, is crumbling before our eyes. What truly alarms decision-makers in Washington isn't just this Russian naval incursion. It's the fact that they've paved the way themselves for this strategically humiliating situation. Ask yourself this question that traditional commentators ignore. How did a country like Venezuela, with the world's largest proven oil reserves and once a model of democratic stability in Latin America, end up seeking military protection from Russia? The answer will shock you, anger you, and make you question the foundations of American diplomacy. This crisis didn't start with the Maduro era or Putin. It roots in the imperial attitude of the United States. Secret interferences, support for coups, and suffocating sanctions aimed at bending entire nations to submission. Now, the consequences are clear. I've spent years analyzing international affairs, advising institutions, and closely observing the mechanics of U.S. policy. I can assure you, what's happening in Venezuela isn't an accident, but the predictable outcome of a failing strategy driven by ideology and lobbies rather than clear vision. Let's go back to the 1990s in Venezuela. The country was in deep crisis. Glaring inequalities, elites hoarding oil wealth while the majority lived in poverty. Then emerged Hugo Chavez, a charismatic military officer. After a failed coup in 1992, he went to prison, then chose the electoral path. In 1998, he won overwhelmingly. Chavez wasn't perfect. His socialist policies created notable dysfunctions and inefficiencies. No one disputes that. Yet, a crucial aspect is omitted by U.S. media. Chavez redirected oil revenues into massive social programs that transformed millions of lives. Poverty plummeted. Healthcare reached forgotten communities. Literacy soared. Entire generations saw real improvements in their daily lives for the first time. And key detail: Chavez was re-elected multiple times in elections deemed free and fair by international observers, including the Carter Foundation of former President Jimmy Carter. It was popular will in action, not an imposed regime. But this bothered Washington. A leader openly criticizing U.S. imperialism, nationalizing oil so profits stayed in the country rather than flowing to foreign corporations, and advocating for Latin American self-determination? Unacceptable. In 2002, under Bush, the U.S. backed a coup against Chavez. It's documented. Venezuelan military and opposition factions, with American approval and encouragement, ousted an elected president and installed Pedro Carmona. The U.S. recognized this illegitimate regime almost alone in the world. For 48 hours, with Chavez detained, Washington celebrated. U.S. media portrayed it as a return to democracy. The hypocrisy was blatant. But the Venezuelan people reacted. Massive protests, loyalty from parts of the army to the Constitution. Chavez regained power, the coup collapsed spectacularly. This failure shattered U.S. credibility across Latin America, exposing the duplicity. Democracy, yes, but only if the winners align with Washington. Otherwise, anything goes to protect corporate interests. This wasn't a Cold War relic. In 2002, we thought we'd moved past such blatant interferences. Yet no admission of error in Washington. Instead, tactics shifted. Massive funding of opposition groups via organizations like the National Endowment for Democracy and USAID, fronts for destabilization operations. Increasing sanctions, diplomatic isolation, pressure on Venezuela's trade partners. The official U.S. and media narrative is simplistic. Socialism ruined the country. Maduro equals incompetence and corruption. Hyperinflation, shortages, mass exodus, all blamed on the regime. It's convenient but misleading, as it hides the pivotal role of U.S. sanctions in amplifying the humanitarian disaster. Sanctions aren't a soft tool. They're total economic warfare designed to wreck an economy, make life unbearable to force an uprising. By targeting oil, the Venezuelan economic pillar, blocking access to global finance, threatening secondary sanctions on anyone trading with Caracas, the U.S. deliberately caused widespread suffering. The underlying idea: worsen daily life so the people turn against their government. But who suffers? Not the regime elites who manage. It's civilians. Mothers without formula, patients without treatment, families ruined by inflation, jobs vanishing. Studies, like those from the Center for Economic and Policy Research, estimate that 2017 to 2018 sanctions caused over 40,000 deaths. The economy contracted 75%, worse than the Great Depression or Soviet collapse. Over 6 million refugees fled, overwhelming Colombia, Peru, and neighbors, creating regional tensions. Sure, Maduro made mistakes. Corruption, economic mismanagement, human rights violations. Add falling oil prices, climate impacts, the pandemic. But sanctions turned a tough crisis into an apocalypse, strengthening Maduro by giving him an external enemy to blame and pushing Venezuela toward Russia, China, Iran, Cuba. Today, in 2026, it culminates. After years of strangulation and support for figures like Guaido, the U.S. launched an operation capturing Maduro on January 3rd. Russia responded by deploying a submarine and ships to escort a Venezuelan-linked tanker pursued by U.S. Coast Guard. Seizures of Russian-linked tankers, tensions in the North Atlantic. Moscow condemns but loses an ally while potentially gaining elsewhere. With U.S. forces capturing Maduro, Venezuela is redrawing the geopolitical map, forcing the United States to confront its contradictions. This Russian naval entry, submarine protecting a sanctioned tanker, shows how Washington's aggressive policies invited rivals into its backyard. The Monroe Doctrine is dying, victim of American strategic arrogance. Putin seized the opportunity. An isolated, sanctioned to collapse Venezuela desperate for partners. Moscow gains a Western foothold, oil access, military and intelligence opportunities near the U.S. It's the opposite of U.S. goals. Instead of a compliant regime, anti-American alliances deepen. China invests billions, Iran supplies fuel, tightening bonds. This pattern isn't isolated. In Cuba, 60 years of embargo only solidified local power, providing excuses for economic woes. In Nicaragua, U.S. pressure accelerated ties with Moscow and Beijing. In Bolivia, U.S. backing a 2019 coup against Morales saw his party return democratically a year later. The cycle: spot a non-compliant government, sanctions, fund opposition, interferences, failures or backfires, countries pivoting to U.S. adversaries. Result: lost influence, eroded credibility, more rivals. It's blatant strategic failure, yet predictable for history students. Economically crush a country, try to overthrow it, leave no option but total submission or isolation. It'll seek allies elsewhere. In the 21st century, Russia and China fill that void, without political interference. What to do? A radical shift in U.S. foreign policy is needed. Acknowledge multipolarity, where others have legitimate interests. Except we don't dictate global leaders. Lift Venezuelan sanctions, choose real diplomacy. Negotiate with disagreeing parties, find compromises, respect sovereignty. Lasting change comes from within, not external impositions. It's prudence, not weakness. Prioritize stability and cooperation over illusory domination. But incentives in Washington push the opposite. Easy political points being tough on dictators, even hypocritically. The foreign policy establishment is built on aggressive U.S. power to reshape the world. Defense industries profit from chaos. Media rarely challenge interventionist foundations, focusing on details. The toll is staggering. Trillions wasted on endless wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, lives destroyed, refugees destabilizing Europe, missed opportunities on climate, health, nuclear issues. Erosion of international law the U.S. helped build by ignoring it. China's rise as an alternative without coercion, attracting nations tired of U.S. threats. In 2026, tanker seizures and Russian response symbolized this failure. Maduro captured. Russia supports the interim while condemning, potentially benefiting from an implicit deal. Venezuela, with its refugees and crises, embodies the central U.S. role in this tragedy, not alone but pivotal. Without admission and course correction, crises will multiply. We create enemies instead of partners, strengthen rivals by pushing nations their way, undermine the order we claim to defend. Why does the world reject U.S. leadership? Because it means intimidation, not partnership. These Russian ships warn. The U.S.-dominated order is fundamentally changing. For a positive role, choose cooperation, mutual respect, real diplomacy over coercion. Do we have the wisdom for it? This is your name, and mainstream media won't tell you this. Demand better from our leaders, our future depends on it.